Welcome to this explainer. Today we're diving into something really fascinating and honestly, a little bit mind-bending. We're going to unpack how our most basic everyday habits are deeply connected to these massive global forces. We often just breeze through our daily routines without a second thought. But what if the products we're using and the lifestyle trends we're following aren't actually choices we're making freely? We're going to break down the surprising science and the hidden corporate strategies behind something as seemingly innocent as your cosmetic routine and how that scales up to influence your entire lifestyle.
So let's start with a really simple, everyday action to see how a small physical habit might actually be a hidden addiction. Think about nail polish. From a psychological and medical point of view, when someone first starts applying it, they might change the color, say, once a week. But over time, that frequency almost always creeps up. Suddenly, it's twice a week, then 3 times a week. Why does this happen? Is it really just a preference for a fresh color, or is there an actual chemical reason driving this escalating behavior? Well, to figure that out, we have to look at the physical mechanics of how we apply it.
Picture the process. When you apply nail polish, your fingers are naturally held quite close to your face, right? Now, because of that physical proximity, invisible chemical vapors, specifically one called toluene, evaporate off the brush and are inhaled directly through your nose, right into your olfactory channel. And when these vapors hit your brain, they deliver this immediate, unexpected strike. It's basically a chemical kick. It's a quick, cheap thrill for your nervous system.
Now, without the user even realizing it, their brain has just been temporarily hijacked. Medical science actually has a term for this temporary state: euphoria. It's a short-span feeling of extreme happiness or sudden well-being. Think about it. Nothing particularly joyful has actually happened in this person's life in that exact moment. They simply opened a bottle and painted a color onto their nails. But the brain registers that chemical strike as a burst of genuine happiness. And since our brains absolutely love that euphoric feeling, a subtle addiction starts to form. So what exactly are we inhaling to get this kick?
This is where we get into VOCs, or volatile organic compounds. What's wild is that you literally cannot manufacture liquid nail polish without these things. They act as essential solvents, which basically means they dissolve all the other ingredients together to give the polish that perfectly smooth liquid texture. But here's the catch. Their volatile nature means they vaporize instantly at room temperature. They rise straight up from the brush, right into the air we breathe.
And we're talking about some serious heavy hitters in this mixture. You've got toluene, which we mentioned gives you that initial brain kick. There's ethyl acetate, and of course, acetone, which is mostly found in nail polish removers and acts as a highly effective solvent that delivers that exact same euphoric hit to the brain. But there's one chemical on this list that'll probably make you do a double take when you realize where else it's used.
Yeah, formaldehyde. If you ever walked into a high school biology lab and saw those preserved biological samples floating in glass jars, they were sitting in a solution of formalin, which is derived from formaldehyde. It is honestly quite shocking to realize that the exact same chemical used for preserving biological specimens is painted directly onto our bodies on a regular basis.
And here's the really wild part. This chemical high isn't just limited to cosmetics. The source points out that soldiers, for example, will often pull their shoes closer and closer to their faces as they polish them, completely unknowingly inhaling the toluene and acetone packed into the wax. Or think about kids in school sniffing correction fluid or whiteboard markers. They are getting high on the exact same volatile solvents. It's why informed parents keep certain markers away from young kids. Even just smelling petrol at a gas station gives the general public this volatile organic hit. Essentially, if a scent feels oddly addictive, there's a very good chance it's quietly hijacking your brain's reward system.
All right, let's move on to the next part of our explainer, the gel polish threats and the TPO ban.
So recently, there has been a massive explosion in the popularity of highly reflective waterproof gel polishes. People absolutely love these products because when the light hits them, they shine like a mirror, right? It looks almost like a perfect waterproof lamination on the nail. But that highly sought-after, flawless aesthetic hides a major catch. It is entirely dependent on a chemical compound known as TPO.
This is where it gets really serious. Highly educated consumers were using these shiny, gel-like products for years, totally in the dark about the chemical makeup of what they were applying. It wasn't until later that devastating research linked prolonged exposure to TPO with severe health issues. We're talking cancer, polycystic ovarian disease, and severe infertility.
The evidence was so undeniable that over 20 countries in the European Union didn't just issue a polite warning, they slammed the brakes. They issued an outright comprehensive ban across more than 24 nations. You can't produce it, you can't store it in a warehouse, and you absolutely cannot sell it, period. But that really begs the question, How do highly toxic products like this become so deeply embedded in our society in the first place?
Which brings us to our next section, trickle-down consumerism.
To truly understand how harmful products can just flood our daily lives, we have to look at the trickle-down theory in action. Here's how it works. Corporations will push their surplus products or specific brand ideologies onto the wealthiest tier of society first, often because the elites already have shares in these companies. Then the urban middle class, who are usually eager to emulate the wealthy and feel modern, will blindly copy those trends without asking any questions. And eventually, this unquestioned consumption trickles all the way down to rural and poorer demographics. It's just a cascade of imitation.
Let's look at a classic example of this: packaged fruit juices. Back in the 1990s, the urban middle class started buying these expensive, packaged juices because they believed they were adopting this sophisticated, healthy lifestyle from the wealthy. It was a total status symbol. But it took years for these same consumers to actually turn the box around, read the ingredients, and realize they were paying a massive premium for a liquid that was only 4% actual fruit juice and 96% sugar water.
And we see this disconnect happening everywhere. The middle class completely abandoned traditional, highly nutritious barley because corporations convinced the wealthy that packaged oats were the ultimate breakfast. The city folks even lectured rural communities about the benefits of oats, while the rural population just watched in amusement, remembering how, just a decade prior, those same city folks had mocked them for eating traditional millets and barley. Or look at festivals. In a culture with over 50 varieties of rich traditional festive sweets, corporate marketing successfully convinced the masses that handing out heavily processed packaged chocolates was somehow the superior, more modern way to celebrate.
The source points out something really fascinating here to explain this vulnerability. The urban middle class is often totally disconnected from their roots. First, second, and third generation city dwellers often cut ties with the traditional practices of their ancestors in the name of modernization. And because they lack that grounded, foundational experience, they end up relying entirely on TV, newspapers, and the internet for their narratives. They become rootless, which makes them the absolute prime victims for corporate manipulation. They just eagerly adopt the next trend because they don't have an anchor.
This quote really hits the nail on the head. Your culture is also a product. Corporations honestly do not care about your religion or your background. Whether it's Diwali, Holi, Eid, or Christmas, the corporate machine doesn't discriminate. They just view every single cultural event as a massive opportunity to push a product. They want to hand you something today that gets you hooked, and when that exact same product makes you sick 10 months down the line, well, they'll be right there waiting to sell you the medical solution too.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with this thought. Are the choices you make every day genuinely yours, or are they just the result of a carefully engineered corporate trickle-down effect? From the chemical vapors and cosmetics that are quietly hijacking our brain's reward centers, right down to the breakfast foods and festival gifts we're conditioned to buy, we are constantly being steered. So the next time you feel a sudden craving or this burning need to adopt the latest lifestyle trend, take a pause. Ask yourself, who is actually benefiting from this choice? Stay curious, stay informed, and always question the narrative. Thanks for hanging out with me today.